To the broadcast. For the past several weeks, mass demonstrations have taken place in Mexico's capital city. The protesters mostly consist of teachers who have walked off the job. They've been marching in opposition to President Peña Nieto's ambitious plan to overhaul its long-neglected education system. Among other things, the plan will require teachers to take an evaluation exam, testing their ability as educators. The legislation has been passed and approved by the Senate. It's a big victory for the new president and signals that Mexico is ready to enter a new era of education. But as correspondent Franc Contreras reports, passing the reform wasn't easy, and controlling its aftermath looks to be a challenge as well.
The most publicly visible part of Mexico's political battle to fix its education system took place here in the streets of Mexico City. For one full month, members of Mexico's powerful teachers union protested the government's plans to change the country's education laws.
We have sent our proposals so the government can take into account the cultural diversity of our towns. But what the state really wants is to privatize education and replace our positions with new workers.
In large part, the changes remove union members' rights to sell their jobs or pass them on to family members. A school teacher who could pay up to $25,000 for a lifelong position to a retiring teacher. That money was then going to the union. But many other union teachers were getting salaries without even going to work. According to an independent study, 22,000 union employees received $130 million in wages annually. The education reforms were among the first ambitious actions taken by President Enrique Peña Nieto during his first few weeks in office. Peña Nieto's administration quickly arrested Elba Esther Gordillo, who directed the union for more than 20 years. Gordillo was a kingmaker who could deliver 1 million votes to presidential contenders. They would end up owing her political and economic favors. She became immensely wealthy and was widely considered among the most powerful women in Latin America. She often flaunted her power and wealth in public. Union members say her plastic surgeries were paid by their dues, and she was once caught handing out a fleet of Hummers to regional union bosses. With Gordillo now behind bars, Mexico's Congress and Senate fast-tracked constitutional amendments designed to weaken the teachers' union. Some of the key changes were passed within 25 minutes, probably not enough time for lawmakers to actually read the new laws they were enacting.
Para hacer realidad la educación de calidad en México.
The president campaigned to convince citizens that the education reforms were not aimed at hurting the teachers, but instead to help Mexican school children.
With the education reform, your children will have better teachers, will spend more time in school, will have better educational materials, and will have computers and internet made available to them.
By most international standards, Mexico's public school system has been failing for decades. Classrooms are notoriously under-equipped. Children who attend those schools fall far behind in math and science. With the new law, teachers will have to take tests periodically to ensure that they are up to standard. New teachers could lose their jobs if they fail. This triggered a wave of protests.
We're going to ignore calls for evaluation. We're not going to let them come into our classrooms. The teachers' union will resist even more against the implementation of this reform.
We are going to keep fighting politically. We are going to try to bring down this reform on a legal basis because there are still other options open to us, such as calling it unconstitutional.
Thousands of dissident teachers came to protest in the capital from the southern Mexican states of Chiapas, Guerrero, and Oaxaca, where poverty and inequality prevail. We're in the middle of the tent city now, located here in Mexico City's main plaza, the Zócalo. As you can see, there are thousands and perhaps tens of thousands of teachers who've been camped out here for more than a month and a half. They say they're here to protect the public's right to a free education. Now, joining us here is a large group of teachers who are from the southern Mexican state of Oaxaca, one of the poorest states. I'm going to ask one of the teachers a question. ¿Por qué los medios de comunicación los muestran como gente floja?
Porque somos un país gobernados por los medios masivos de comunicación.
I asked her, why are the national news media here showing them or portraying them as people who are lazy and don't really want to do their work? And she said it's largely because this country is not governed by a democracy, but instead by media corporations. Natividad Sanchez Martinez is from a poor village where residents speak an indigenous language called Mije. She thinks that the tests will inevitably discriminate against communities like hers.
We can't talk about standardized or universal evaluation. The evaluations only seek to deprive those of us who are employed of our jobs and give them to college graduates.
At a private school in the nearby state of Mexico, elementary school teacher Ana Guadalupe Valle Bautista supervises her students as they identify and correct more than 100 errors in school textbooks printed by the government. She says teachers who are truly dedicated to educating won't have any problems taking the government's new evaluation tests.
It's good to demand that we constantly update our knowledge and engage with each other, to demand that we give more. I'm 100% in agreement with the idea of evaluating teachers.
As a veteran educator, Valle is convinced that her country now has the historic opportunity to finally create a school system that will help Mexican children compete in an increasingly globalized economy.
There are generations coming up who are clamoring for an education. Consequently, we do need all of the teachers to commit to ensure that this reform, which is a good one, moves forward.
The world's wealthiest businessman, Carlos Slim, urged the government to include dissident teachers in the national debate over how to remake education in Mexico. But the Peña Nieto government sent federal riot police and physically removed them from the main plaza. With the dissident teachers out of the way, at least temporarily, the country now faces the difficult and complex challenge of actually improving the quality of education for more than 30 million students in Mexico's public schools. The new law left important issues up in the air. It does not specify who will oversee the policing of teaching standards or how teachers will be assessed, something critics say needs to be addressed immediately.
An estimated 12,000 teachers took to the streets of Mexico City for the protests this past month, causing widespread congestion in a city already famous for its traffic.